Welcome to another episode of Inspired Content, where I rate, review, and come up with prompts you can use to create works inspired by books, movies, games, and more. For this episode, we'll be looking at Cuckoo's Egg by C.J.Cherryh, and let's get into that. How would I rate this one? I would give it about a 5.2 out of a 5.8. Now, overall, I would say that the idea is good. I like the somewhat alien world. It's still very similar to human world. It feels very much like sort of like samurai or like feudal Japan on its cusp of becoming open to the Western world. So there's an aspect of some of that story going into this. It feels like, at least to me. But I think I struggled with the characters. Like the alien character, Dun, D-U-U-N, I actually did alright with. The biggest character I had to struggle with was dealing with the human character, Thorn. I really felt like I couldn't figure out how old he was. Oftentimes he acted like a child, even when he was supposedly reaching his adulthood, which I don't know what age that is, because like the reference for any kind of gauge of what kind of development he's reached. Contextually, we have the alien culture as the one that we're basing it all off of. I don't know what the time frame is like in the difference between them, but I always felt like he was Thorn always felt like he was 8 to 12 years old and like emotionally immature. And I struggled a little bit with Dune, because it's one of those things that you see in movies sometimes, where like the brilliant commander for the Allied forces or whatever has this amazing plan, but they tell nobody what that plan is, and they're just supposed to accept orders. But in this case, he's raising the child to become an independent, strong strategist and tactician. And the way you do that is to never tell him anything, and he has to figure it all out for himself. Of course he's going to be incapable of doing anything for himself at a certain point. And the degree to which the approach of handling the interactions has always been sort of like, make him paranoid, make him trust nothing ever. Like, it's a trip, like, for the in the mindset of Thorn, it almost feels like a story written about what it's like to be chronically abused and paranoid. Like, to never have a sense of security within yourself and always fear that something catastrophic is about to happen or somebody's going to betray you. Like, that's not a mindset that I want to follow along with as a main character. So those are my biggest gripes about it. But overall, I like the concept, and I like some of the world building, the cast systems, and the main conflict of everything, and the sort of twist they put into the end about why this is all happening the way it is. Like, I like a lot of that. I just feel like the biggest hurdle for me was the strategy, the approach to what they were doing, and to a certain degree, at least half of the character development in this felt failed. What do you think? I'd love to hear what you think about this book in the comments below, and see what other ideas people might have about this. Maybe I'm missing something. Alright, so now let's break this down into my top 6 ideas inspired by this. So I got my notes here. Number 1. Years ago, I even had a weird dream where a friend of mine who's like I guess I'll call her a pure soul. I had this weird dream where they were sort of in a Rosemary's Baby sort of situation, and they gave birth to a sort of Cthulhu tentacle monster baby, but it looked sort of like the baby from Men in Black, the squid baby from Men in Black, the original Men in Black movie. And because my friend was such a pure soul, the way they raised that baby in the early days offended the cult that had been trying to get her to bring in the Endbringer. And it purified the baby so that you have this adorable, friendly, loving, tentacle squid baby. And so that sort of mindset where somebody's trying to force an alien population or an alien monster onto humanity, but somehow just being good, kind people makes them good, kind creatures that we bring into the fold of humanity. So that's one idea. Number 2. Seeing as how the alien species on this one is sort of based off of wolves, so you have sort of like the lone wolf and pack wolves, and at the same time it's based off of a sort of like the last of the samurai. I feel like this could be a fun way to explore like a, not quite a World War weird, or a weird World War kind of thing, but sort of like a samurai who adopts and trains were creatures. So sort of like a werewolf or a werepanther or something like that, becoming a noble samurai. I think that could be an interesting story. Number 3. This one's sort of like, there's a series a while back that came up with the idea of like uplifting animals. So you take a earth animal and you sort of like through engineering and technology evolve them rapidly in a single generation or so to humanoid or something like that. And I got to thinking, like, what if like an uplifted species, maybe you write the story as we don't know they're an uplifted species yet, we just assume they're an alien population that happens to resemble birds or cat people or whatever, and as you go through the story they're raising a small group or a couple individual human beings, and it's revealed as you go further along that this is a species that we uplifted and then we died off, and this is their attempt to bring back their creators into the universe. So they've cloned from, they've finally been able to crack the ability to clone human beings again from preserved remains or recorded data, decode records of human DNA to a point where they could recreate us again and trying to raise us and bring us back. Idea number 4. There used to be rumors, and I don't know if it was the case or not, of like foreign governments building replicas of American cities in which the population would live as Americans, talk as Americans, and everything else as if they were American citizens, and all the while being ready to become planted in America as spies and agents of those foreign governments. And I'm sort of taking the same idea here, where you have a population of non-human seeming beings all around you, and one human being living within that area, and you could write it one of two different ways. You could write it as, these are aliens that are training to live like humans before they become surgically altered to become human looking so they can infiltrate Earth, or it's a training facility for humans who are training to be like aliens, and the human looking character just hasn't achieved the level yet to be surgically altered and be ready for implanting into the alien population. So I don't know what I would call that one. Maybe infiltration. 5. This one could be sort of done as a fantasy, where it's you had a conflict between a supernatural race of beings and humanity, and part of that, the end of hostilities, was the creation of a treaty that leads to, I guess, essentially changelings, where you exchange children with the aliens, or I guess you could do it as sci-fi with aliens too, but with the other race of beings. So if you had like goblins manifested in the world, and there was a human-goblin conflict, you would have, from either perspective, humans raising a goblin child, or a goblin family, or a goblin city with human children being raised in the goblin way of life. So that's, again, two ways you could do that story. I feel like I'm giving you extra ideas here. You could go either way with a couple of these, and what's that? That gives you 8 ideas instead of 6 by the end of this. But number 6. This one's sort of like a twist on a couple different things. The idea that as humans, we are approaching a point that we may evolve past our current form, and the term for that is usually post-human. And so as we get into post-human forms, the evolution will be more engineered than a natural gradual evolution. And the question in my mind sometimes is, will we go too far in a direction that breaks something about humanity? And so the idea here is, you build a story in a world where you're surrounded by alien-seeming beings, and they're raising individual human beings, and the questions come up of like, who am I and where do I come from? Why am I different from you? And only gradually reveal the fact that the path we took when becoming transhuman, post-human, is one that we made mistakes on, and we can't quite take those mistakes back. But we might be able to produce the next generation, like, say the species is dying out, and there's just no way to save us. But we could engineer or revive a human rather than a post-human or a transhuman being. And bring back a human being and raise them up to be the next generation to learn from learn the lessons that we learned and not make the same mistakes the second chance. And so that's sort of where, like, I feel like I can't really decide which one I like the most. I do feel like the one that makes the most interesting and most powerful choice for a science fiction novella or novel, for me at least, would be number 6. The idea that in our choosing where we go as a species, we chose some things wrong. And we accept that it means the end of us. But that doesn't mean that we can't bring up a generation that is a reflection of the people we were before we made those wrong choices, and give them the chance to be better than we became and learn from our mistakes. I like that message, that idea. It leaves a lot of possibility for how to tell that story. If you create something based off of any of these prompts, I'd love to hear about it in my social media. You can find the links down below. If you're looking for more prompts for writing, you can go check out the playlist over on the side. If you're looking for any of my creative projects that I'm currently working on, I do a daily live update, and I can link to those over on the side. And if you're looking for creative prompts in other categories, such as movies, board games, products or services, food, art, or music, and video games, go check out my channel and check out the different playlists I have available there, and subscribe if you want to get any notifications of the newest uploads. Next episode will be the movie Captain Marvel for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and the next book is next month's first video will be Peter Pan. So if you want to find a copy of that and read it ahead of time, so that when I come back and we can talk about my thoughts on it and you can share your thoughts in the comment, I'd love to hear those. Thanks for joining me for this episode, and I hope to see you for the next one. Take care of yourselves.